All right, we are live. Welcome, John.
Glad to be with you, Natasha.
I got some feedback from people that I tend to jump into the topic a little bit too quickly. So I thought, in order to get people up to speed and give them a chance to join us, that maybe you could give an introduction to the audience of who you are and where you work.
So, my name is John Carpay. I run the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. We are a nonprofit group, a national group, and a registered charity, and we defend freedom in Canada in the court of public opinion and in the courts of law. We have a team of lawyers taking on dozens of cases all across Canada in defense of our freedoms of expression, association, religion, conscience, peaceful assembly, travel, mobility. We were at the forefront of fighting back against the government's unscientific lockdowns, which were massive violations of our charter rights and freedoms. And myself, I have a political science degree from Laval University in Quebec City and a law degree from the University of Calgary. And I'm based in Calgary, but we do have lawyers all over the country, including a lawyer in Montreal who runs our Quebec cases.
Yeah, he must have his hands full. Okay. I wanted to bring people's memories, like remind everybody, because I find it's being memory hold a little bit. So you just recently put out a very involved article. I'm just going to bring it up. One moment. Called Manufacturing Consent, Government Behavioral Engineering of Canadians. So this there, people can go, they can read the entire article, but why don't you give the viewers a rundown of a general overview of the report?
So in Ottawa, at the in the Privy Council office, which is the apex of the federal bureaucracy, there's an Impact and Innovation Unit, IIU, Impact and Innovation Unit. And they are behavioral scientists who seek to nudge Canadians to behave in certain ways. They were very active during the years of the lockdowns and the vaccine passports. They worked with the government to develop this message that the vaccine is safe and effective, therefore get injected. They had crafted that message before the vaccine before the initial testing had even been completed. And when there were a lot of reports, when the COVID vaccine was made available to the public and people started taking it, which initially was voluntarily, there were all these reports about adverse events. People, children, teenagers, young men, people of all ages that were dying after getting injected. And so the Impact and Innovation Unit crafted messages and tested different headlines and had focus groups to come up with messages to persuade Canadians to continue to get injected. And this went on throughout all of the lockdowns and vaccine passports with the use of our tax dollars to get us to change our behavior. It was not government advertising to give you information about something, but this was actually designed to get Canadians to get themselves injected with COVID vaccine.
Yeah. I'd like to bring people back because that was about, I guess, about a year and a half into it or so. When did they start working on the messaging, the nudging?
Well, the vaccine, they started working on the vaccine message in late 2020, even while the safety testing hadn't been completed. Well, and in fact, as we know, these new COVID vaccines were in clinical trials until 2023. So even in
Yeah.
2021, 2022, 2023, the clinical trials were still ongoing. So they crafted the message in late 2020 in anticipation of the release. And then it was starting in 2021, early 2021, January, February, that the vaccine became available to the public. And initially it was voluntary.
Yeah, that didn't last for very long. I'm just going to play for people to remind them, because this was in April 2020. So this was before the vaccines were developed, but I think it really sets the stage of the type of messaging from the get-go that the state had. So people may have memory hold this, and I think it's good to go back through it and remind Canadians of the framework of the disease.
Mr. Speaker, I rise here in this moment, in this House, as our generation faces its greatest challenge yet. We all stand on the shoulders of those who came before us, of all those Canadians who saw our nation through difficult, tumultuous times in our history. Il y a 103 ans aujourd'hui, des jeunes soldats canadiens se trouvaient dans des tranchées en France, à des milliers de kilomètres de chez eux. Le lendemain, ils prendraient d'assaut la côte 145 et participeraient à la dernière bataille de la crête de Vimy.
Vimy Ridge for
À
Anglophones.
l'aube de ce sombre anniversaire, nous nous souvenons de leur courage et de leur sacrifice. Nous nous souvenons de ces soldats qui ont façonné le pays que nous connaissons aujourd'hui. 20 years later, many would sent to the front again.
Okay, so I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. So he went on to talk about the world wars and basically say that this disease was, it was our war. So it's already a very extreme framework, I think, for Canadians. And then, here we go.
Staying home. Even as we stand apart, we stand united in our resolve to do what we must until COVID-19 is defeated. Monsieur le Président.
So that was the, standing apart together. I think that messaging was repeated obsessively, I would say. And then we jump ahead.
As Canada confronts this crisis, we are all called to serve.
So we're at
fight
war.
For and alongside each of our fellow
To
citizens.
fight.
To fight.
For someone's mother, for someone's grandfather, for someone's neighbor. Our job as Canadians is to uphold the
So that continues for a while. That, you're going to war, you're going to be fighting. Every single Canadian is on this war footing. And then to be there for one another, that was oft repeated.
notre détermination à en finir avec ce virus, notre engagement à veiller les uns sur les autres seront mis à l'épreuve.
So we get the picture, but that kind of reminds everybody of the early framing of this. So that was in April 2020, and it was a speech talking about Vimy Ridge, the Second World War, saying we're going to war. The messaging was repeated many times. And then there was even a reference to the Bible, to Easter and, for Passover for Jews. And there was even a reference, I believe, to Hindus. So it became religious in the messaging as well. It was our third world war and a spiritual battle. I mean, this was a virus. So, yeah, so you can see the early messaging. And then I think in the context, the timing of your report, people can better understand how much I think we had already been nudged by that point. Do you think that's fair to say?
Yeah, when Mr. Trudeau and the Quebec Premier Legault and Doug Ford in Ontario and Jason Kenney in Alberta, et cetera, when they did their speaking points, and they were all so similar everywhere, they were using the results of the work product of the um, impact and innovation unit in Ottawa that had crafted messaging with the help of behavioral scientists to push the right buttons that would engender the most support. Again, this is very different from typical advertising where information is being provided. This is getting people to change their behavior, priming Canadians to accept the massive violations of our charter freedoms of association, conscience, religion, travel, mobility, bodily autonomy, which is protected by the Charter Section 7 right to life, liberty, security of the person, protects bodily autonomy. So Canadians were being primed to be obedient and to cooperate and not rebel against these massive violations of our charter rights and freedoms. And so this is very clever because, when we talk about war, we know that it's a very serious topic. People die. There are wars in the world today that are terrible. There have been wars in the past that are terrible. So you start to bring in the war analogy and then this spirit of self-sacrifice. Somebody that's thinking about war and thinking about the importance of sacrificing yourself for a higher cause is obviously far more likely to comply with utterly unscientific lockdown measures that don't save lives, but they're far more likely to comply with it.
Yes, and they're also far more likely, I would argue, to see people who don't comply with it as, seditionists.
Traitors.
Yeah,
Yeah,
traitors.
sedition, traitors. Yeah, shame on you. This is not just a personal choice, but shame on you for not, for still having Christmas dinner with your mother or, going outside for a walk. I mean, they closed parks for crying out loud. Like so unhealthy, right? That it's good for us to get outside and get some fresh air and go for a walk and for physical reasons, for psychological reasons. And no, you gotta stay home and watch TV and watch the hourly count of COVID cases, which were generated by governments abusing the PCR testing and using it for diagnostic purpose that it was never invented for. I digress. But yeah, it's brilliant. Actually, it's very clever to if you or I wanted to violate rights and freedoms of citizens, then this would be a great way to do it. You talk about a war and how we all need to sacrifice to make sure that we win the war. And this is, a matter of life and death in the same way that war is a matter of life and death. Complying with these unscientific, useless, and destructive restrictions is, it's like war. It's going to save lives.
Yeah, and it ended with the War Measures Act, which was rebranded as the Emergency Measures Act, but it originally was called the War Measures Act, being called on Canadians. So it's kind of a fitting arc, a very dispiriting arc, but a fitting arc, I guess. I wanted to bring this up because I think people might have a hard time believing the extent, to which this was planned out. So here we can see this was from the government. I think it was from Health Canada, and it was their methods for pushing the vaccines on people. So the 5 principles for supporting the decision. And you can see for each dose. So there was a general strategy to get people vaccinated. And then the the principles per dose. And they specifically, people can go and look themselves from the science table, read it over. But you can see that it was carefully planned out. Right here, you see, use opt-out strategies to nudge individuals to get vaccinated rather than opt-in strategies. So the default was framed that everybody would be getting it, right? And you weren't selling people on opting in, because the approach was that everybody should be getting it. Basically, that's the way I read this, and that's the way I see it.
Yeah, this is not about informed consent. I mean, the
No.
informed consent, you would have said, well, usually it takes 10 years or at least 5 years to get a vaccine properly tested. And here we've done this in a year, which raises eyebrows. Because if it could be done safely within months, then why haven't we been doing that the last few decades, right? If you could very safely get a vaccine fully, thoroughly tested. But, in fact, it was still in clinical trials in 2021, 2022, 2023. But yeah, this is not informed consent. This is manipulation to get people to comply. And it's our tax dollars that are at work here with these behavioral scientists crafting these messages.
Yeah, we're paying taxes to be psyoped basically by the state, and there are a lot of employees. I've been looking into it, and it's a huge team operating within the Privy Council. So that should raise eyebrows for all Canadians. And I wanted to draw people's attention down here to number 5 on the left, motivation. Consider incentives and contingent rewards that link vaccination to personal values and priorities. So that's the state. What are your thoughts on that?
I thought it was highly unethical when you had Premier Kenney in Alberta offering, $100 to whoever would get injected. They were offering financial incentives.
I didn't know that happened. Wow. Okay.
Oh yeah, and they had also a lottery that if you hadn't yet gotten injected, but if you did so, in this certain time period, whatever, June 15th to June 30th, 2021, whatever that time period was, if you got injected, then you were eligible for a draw, and there was a larger prize of 100,000. And these are all non-doctors as well, which is kind of odd, because usually you have the code of ethical ethics that in the same way with the legal profession, if you're not a member of a law society, you're not supposed to be giving out legal advice. I mean, you can offer opinions, but here you've got the premier, who is not a medical doctor. That's just, in Manitoba did it as well. These people that are not medical doctors that are offering you money to go get a medical treatment. And then it got worse. That was still in the quasi-voluntary stage. And then starting in October of 2021, Premier Jason Kenney and all the other premiers, they said, you have to get injected. And if you don't, you get kicked out of university, you lose your job.
I just want to interrupt with one detail. I believe that this was at the point in September, I think, was when the federal government basically arranged to give each province, $1 billion if they created a vaccine passport, right? I think that was the timeline. So a lot of Canadians don't realize that there was a federal bribe, because some of the premiers had said, no, we'll never, force compliance on this. And then every single one changed their tune at that point.
Yeah, very, very sad. And this is in respect of an illness, which if you actually look at the government's own data, if you kind of disregard the hourly fear mongering where they've got these scary COVID numbers, And by the way, on that point, in one of the Justice Centre's court actions in Manitoba, we had a Manitoba government official admit under oath that every time that they said that there was 1,000 COVID cases, they knew that at least 400 of the 1,000 people did not have COVID. And so they were wildly exaggerating by using this PCR testing, which cannot and does not diagnose COVID. So they're generating these scary numbers. When you look at the death data, you see very little change in the all population mortality, right? From 2019 to 2020. In 2020, and slightly more deaths. You don't really see a big. You see a much larger increase in the death rate in 2022 after everybody's been vaccinated. I have to mention as well that according to Statistics Canada, there were more people who died of COVID after 80% of Canadians had been injected with COVID vaccine. So in 2020, before the vaccine, according to Statistics Canada, there were 16,000 COVID deaths, 16,000, which of course the actual number is much lower, but this is what Stats Canada says, 16,000 deaths in 2020. In 2022, after 80% of Canadians have had 2 or more shots, we get 20,000 COVID deaths. So COVID deaths went up from 16,000 to 20,000 after the whole population got vaccinated with the supposedly effective vaccine. It's just
and it was supposed to be a less virulent variant by that point, because that was the other thing they were talking about, all the different variants to freak people out, to think that it'll just keep mutating into a Ebola or whatever. That was another. I had people who'd never expressed any interest in health to me, like their entire lives, suddenly talking to me about variants.
Yeah. No, the fear, but this is a principle of propaganda that has been known by many politicians across history, and it's known by corporations as well. That for better or for worse, when people hear a message hundreds of times, they come to accept it as true.
Yeah.
Most people on most topics. Now, there would be exceptions if there was a topic that you knew a lot about. Okay, so if you were really into motorcycles and you know everything there is to know about motorcycles, and if you think that the Harley Davidson is the best brand of motorcycle, you can hear radio ads 1,000 times saying that the Kawasaki is the best motorcycle. It's not going to impact you if you know a lot about the topic. But if you're like me and probably the majority of the population, if you don't know much about motorcycles and you hear hundreds and hundreds of times, you hear that the Kawasaki is the best motorcycle, you kind of come to accept that. And so here we had people put into a state of fear. So they didn't go out. They watched probably way more television than what they did before.
Yeah.
And it's this vicious cycle. They get the fear from the television that makes them watch more television. I'm saying television, using the word loosely for, all media. And people heard, this is going to be as bad as the Spanish flu of 1918. This is an unusually deadly killer. It's going to cripple huge numbers of young people are going to be permanently injured, which also didn't happen. Yes, some people were, but not huge numbers. And so the propaganda works. If you hear something hundreds of times, then you come to believe it to be true.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I'm going to play this video, but also it became apparent to me very quickly, and I stand by this opinion. It is just an opinion, but it became apparent to me that there was no exit strategy with the COVID regime. And so I think people were primed when, by the time the jabs came out, they thought this is the way we can get out of this. They're not gonna stop. Like this we'll all go like good little citizens who are at war, like good warriors, good soldiers, and we'll do this for grandma. And then, we'll get out of this tyrannical totalitarian medical hellscape, right? So I'm just going to, one second, I'm going to play this for people so they remember.
We're all in this together.
We've come so far in the fight against COVID, it's time to finish this pandemic for good. So get vaccinated. If you know someone who hasn't, talk to them. For our kids, for our communities, for our economy. It's how we get forward together.
Vaccines are safe and effective for you. Vaccines are the best way for you to protect yourself, your family, and your community. So get vaccinated. Let's fight COVID-19 together.
Just get
Pour vous
vaccinated.
protéger vous-même, pour protéger les plus fragiles d'entre nous, pour protéger l'ensemble de la population, le meilleur moyen connu demeure le vaccin. S'il vous plaît, soyez
C'est pas vrai.
responsables, soyez solidaires.
Be
Faites-vous
responsible, protect others.
We all agree getting vaccinated is the way forward. We're all in agreement. This is not a partisan issue, so please get vaccinated.
We're united, and it's time to get the shot. Vaccines save lives. They're how we're going to beat COVID, and it's time for everyone to do it. Get the shot.
Get the shot.
Clever.
Yeah.
Well, people have there's part of our human psychology that we don't like to be alone. It's scary, right? You feel safer. If you were in a foreign city and you were getting onto a metro, okay, and it's a foreign country and you don't speak the language and you're by yourself, and there's one car that it's empty or it has one or two people in it, and there's another car that's full. I'd venture a guess most people, they would go into the car that was full because you feel safer, because there's a bunch of other people around. So maybe you think, if you got attacked or something, other people might protect you. You feel safer, right? But to be alone, to be by yourself for most people is incredibly difficult. So here, this is very clever. And this is probably not, I don't know if there's any connection with the Impact and Innovation Unit here when you had the 5 party leaders, but it's very clever because it's like, come on, everybody agrees, this is kind of like gravity, or like, the earth is round and gravity is real. You drop something and it'll fall, and you got to get the shot, and it's really hard for most people to kind of go, no, this is wrong.
Yeah, it was interesting because there was the whole gamut really within that. And for people who don't speak French, he was saying, you start by protecting yourself and then you protect others, and it's the responsible thing to do. And like this intense guilt trip, right? You can still tap into the Catholic guilt remnants, I think, in Quebec. Like guilt was used a lot here as a strategy. And it was effective. And there is, we are social creatures. And I think people have forgotten, perhaps some people have conveniently forgotten out of, some sense of shame for the way that they behaved. But, I was yelled at publicly for walking on a bike path. And actually it happened more than once in front of a young child, because young men felt unsafe. They felt that I was too close on my side of the bike path, because I was holding hands with my young child. So a lot of people are shaken up by that kind of behavior. They don't want to be screamed at publicly for not wearing a mask. They don't want to be, kicked out of an establishment. They don't want to be persona non grata among their family or whatever. And when you turn on the TV and you see this messaging over and over and over again, it's safe and effective, it's safe and effective, it's the way forward, it's the way forward. We're all in this together. We're doing this for each other. Just ça va bien aller. It's like an endless barrage of, Soviet level messaging. I think it obviously worked on a lot of people. But the other thing that I think we need to remember, in defense of some of the people that were heavily indoctrinated by this, there was really extreme clamping down on any kind of criticism or any kind of alternative, non-government sanctioned, non-big pharma information that was coming out at the time. So people who couldn't find other media, that they didn't have access to another story, really, a different narrative.
Well, thank God for independent media like you, because that's how the word got out. Because I know for the Justice Center, prior to lockdowns in March of 2020, we got not huge amounts of media coverage, but a fair amount. You know, we've been around already for 10 years. We had, court cases all over Canada on charter freedoms and the rights of parents to raise and educate their own children as parents deem best, and freedoms of conscience, religion, expression, campus free speech to put forward unpopular views on campus, and so on. But so we had a fair amount of media. And then in March of 2020, lockdowns came, and we didn't get a single phone call from the CBC or other media for years, because we questioned the lockdowns. Then when we didn't get any intelligent answers to our questions, we opposed lockdowns. But we started out very thoughtfully questioning, okay, are you weighing the harms of lockdowns? Which no government was. They were all fanatically, we're saving thousands of lives. We already know that lockdowns are wonderful and saving lives, so we don't need to keep track of anything. That was their attitude. They didn't track lockdown harms. They didn't do a weighing and measuring exercise of no cost benefit analysis, which they're required to do under the Constitution. If the government has a health order that violates one or more of your constitutional freedoms, the government has to have persuasive evidence to show that it's doing more good than harm.
I don't mean to interrupt. I'm from Quebec.
No, it's okay.
We're rude. We just interrupt each other constantly. So I try and dial it down, but I can't. What you were saying reminded me, and I bring this up easily and often in discussions about the COVID regime, because I think it's relevant in many different ways now. But our response was a response that was basically a pathway that was created in the UK at the Imperial College. There were people working on studies, and they had done, catastrophic pandemic approaches and modeled death rates and modeled all sorts of different inputs. And one of the chief epidemiologists who was involved in modeling all of this is the disgraced epidemiologist Neil Ferguson. And he was on, I guess, the team of academics who put forward the most extreme approach to dealing with COVID. There was another approach, and it wasn't pursued. And the other approach would have been the traditional proven approach of, doing your best to mitigate, maybe putting special protections in place for seniors, making sure that they get a lot more attention and care, and then having young and productive people out making money and living their lives, and, letting the virus pass through these young and healthy people first.
Yeah, absolutely.
There were alternative paths. Like now the narrative is being crafted that, it's unfortunate what happened, but there was no other way, and they did their best with the information they had at the time. And it's nonsense. This man, Neil Ferguson, was caught breaking his own lockdown in having an affair with someone. And I'm not saying that to discuss his personal life, but it shows how little he believed in his own science, the trademark.
Well, we
science.
saw this in Alberta. We had Jason Kenney locking up pastors in jail for not complying with, again, utterly unscientific and stupid rules, which he refuses to debate. I've challenged Jason Kenney to debate lockdowns, and of course he won't debate that with me or with anybody else. So he's locking up pastors in jail, and then he breaks the COVID rules by dining with his cabinet ministers at this Sky Palace restaurant. Complete hypocrisy. But with Neil Ferguson, it's worse than hypocrisy. It's the fact he made previous predictions about mad cow disease was going to kill huge numbers of people, and the bird flu was going to kill millions or tens of millions of people. And then, total bird flu deaths over the course of a decade was, 789 or something, which obviously it's horrible that there were 789 people or whatever number, right? But it was not tens of millions. So he has a track record of having totally
being wrong
incorrect. Yeah, he's a track record of being wrong.
and alarmist.
So it's really, I think the responsibility is more with our elected leaders who bought into this, and they didn't have to. And you had some strange outposts like Sweden, of all countries, which I wouldn't have expected Sweden. They said, well, no, we're not doing this. And they didn't, and there were a lot of American states where they just didn't lock down, and they were none the worse for it.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Yeah, with Neil Ferguson, and that's a different topic, but with the stamping out that we're seeing now with animals, like with the ostriches, and just the approach that became the standard operating procedure, he was involved in that as well. And there were over 6 million animals culled with the mad cow Chicken Little modeling that he was a part of in the early noughts. And part of the reason I was so skeptical about the COVID regime before the lockdowns began was because I had looked into Imperial College. I had seen his name. I had remembered from my youth this, catastrophic stamping out, which, ruined people's lives and was unnecessary. And so I had made the association. So these people who are consistently alarmist in their modeling predictions, and the same, just, I don't want to get off topic, but so people understand, we also use models for climate change policies, right? So modeling is not some kind of irrelevant, irrelevant way of informing policy. It's really, really pertinent. So we're seeing that the modeling created these catastrophic, the COVID regime failures, and our approach to agriculture, our approach to, the environment. So it really does matter. But sorry, I got off on tangents. So to bring us back.
Yeah, go
sorry,
ahead.
Please. No, you go ahead.
Well, the fear mongering, it's not as scary as COVID, because COVID, the message that the government funded media were putting out was COVID threatens everybody. That was a clear message that was always there implicitly, right? If everybody has to wear a mask, and if everybody has to keep 6 feet away from each other, and if everybody is prohibited from gathering over Christmas dinner with your parents or with your kids, or the subtext was everybody is threatened by COVID, and that's completely false. COVID was a threat to people over 70 who were already in poor health.
Yes.
But if you were under 70 and healthy, COVID was less dangerous to you than getting into a car and driving from point A to point B. You have a bigger risk of death or injury from driving a car than what you do from the risk of death or injury from COVID. And so it was very effective because it got everybody afraid. So there's healthy 20-year-olds and healthy 50-year-olds who are terrified, absolutely terrified of COVID, without any reason for it. Now, with the climate alarmism, fortunately, or I think fortunately, they're not able to raise the fear quite up to the same level, because with COVID, they were threatening imminent death. If you don't watch out, you could get COVID today and you could be dead by tomorrow. That was the subtext. So that really, if you feel like you're in imminent risk of dying, that really heightens the fear. With the climate alarmism, they're doing their best to get people scared, but it's not the same. And the messages are so false. Like they say that we have more extreme weather events. That's simply not true. When you look at the government data on floods, on hurricanes, on droughts, on forest fires, when you look at the actual data, we don't see the catastrophe that the CBC is talking about all the time. And it's the same thing with COVID. If you look at the actual death data, how many people are dying, what ages are they? There isn't a catastrophe. COVID was not an unusually deadly killer, as can be seen simply by looking at the government's data.
Yeah, and by country comparisons, 1 in 3 people in Sweden didn't conk out. They were okay.
Yeah, they were okay.
This was a speech that hit it was from not a speech, but it was from I think it actually was delivered as a speech from the PMO's office So it was promoting the COVID alert app. I don't know if people remember that, but
I remember it didn't work that well. The federal one didn't work that well. Was that?
I don't know what the uptake was like. But I knew people who were suggesting I use it, and I just thought it was very, very creepy and weird. But this was how they sold it. We've got the COVID alert app. Take the teacher who felt fine, but who tested positive after the app warned her she'd been exposed. COVID alert meant she went home instead of the classroom. You know, like children were at like almost no risk whatsoever from this unless they were incredibly unhealthy to begin with. But, you know, it right away is framing it as somebody could go into a classroom and basically like wipe out a bunch of kids, right? And then it's get your flu shots. And then the steps that we're taking today will make all the difference in what will happen in 2 weeks and in 2 months.
Oh, yeah.
Wear a mask. It saves lives. Wash your hands. Keep your distance. Get your flu shot. Like it's just, it's
I
great.
love the second last bullet. The actions of our parents and grandparents, the generation that faced the Great Depression and the Second World War, remind us that we have to be resilient and patient in times of crisis. They built the world of today. Now it's up to us to build the world of tomorrow, and we have to start by protecting them.
Yeah.
Yeah, very clever.
I guess one thing that I find, I think I'd like to switch out of this topic, but one thing, just because I'm very interested in another case that you're covering, one thing I found astonishing is just that it worked. So I guess like what I need to understand, because I just think it's so transparent, like this propaganda is so heavy-handed, but it did work. I accept that it worked on most people. Would they be trotting out, I guess to like steelman the argument against the nudge unit, the behavioral scientists, would they just be trotting out the same messaging and maybe it wouldn't be backed by as many studies on persuasion? Like, is it really that harmful, John, that we have to pay for our own psyops?
I think for a live political issue that has not been settled or resolved, I don't think it's appropriate for. It'll be okay for political parties. You know, every political party has a budget,
Yeah.
and I'm sure that every political party has focus groups and they test messages. There's nothing wrong with that in and of itself. You know, a charity could test different messages and appeals and see, you know, what's the best way for us to persuade people to our way of thinking, or the best way to raise money, etc. But here you've got the violation of constitutional rights and freedoms with these measures, right? Governments across Canada, when governments were sued by Justice Centre lawyers in court, the governments admitted instantaneously, immediately, they admitted in court that the lockdown measures did violate the freedoms of association, peaceful assembly, religion, conscience, and so on. They admitted that. They still won at the end of the day because the judges embraced the media narrative and did not take a hard look at the evidence and kind of wrote the media narrative into their court rulings. And so the courts ruled that the violations of charter freedoms were justified by this crisis. And so the judges were completely media washed along with the rest of the population. So,
if for people who might not know, I think it was it the Supreme Court, or I don't know how many judges, but I remember that the judges put out like a
we've all
public
been injected
statement that they all got vaccinated. So I wonder how you could possibly try and pretend that there'd be any kind of neutrality in that context.
Yeah, those were shameful declarations because there have been cases after judges, you know, proudly publicly bragged about their vaccination status, or the court did it on the court websites. You know, every judge of the BC Supreme Court, or the Manitoba Court of Queen's Bench, or the Superior Court of Justice of Ontario, whatever, you know, every judge has been injected. So that was, you know, it was very sad. I wrote a book about this actually called Corrupted by Fear. and look at the history of what happened in Germany in the 1930s, where ideology crept into the law faculties and the judiciary and the law societies and the lawyers and everybody. Ideology infiltrated everything, the medical establishment, the legal establishment, the police, the crown prosecutors, or not crown, but the prosecutors. So ideology spreads, and then we lose our rights and freedoms in the process.
I think that's a perfect segue into talking about this case. So I will let you take it away.
So Alberta lawyer Roger Song, you can see his photo. He was a law professor in communist China, and grew up in China and knows the whole system very well. He personally understands what it's like when you don't have the rule of law in a repressive regime, whether it's communist China or a theocratic Iran, or whether it's a fascist national socialist in a repressive regime. You don't have this idea that we are all subject to the law and that the highest principle that must be followed is the law. Rather, it's more about power. So in communist China, the point is, what is in the best interest of the Communist Party of China? Mm-hmm. So if it's in the best interest of the Communist Party that somebody should be locked up in prison for a few years because they said something bad about the government on social media, that's okay, right? Because you don't have the rule of law. The rule of law would say, did somebody commit this crime? Is the law itself constitutional? And if yes, what is the appropriate penalty? That would be the rule of law. What you get in a repressive regime is this idea that everything's about furthering the interests of the Communist Party in China. So woke ideology says equity, diversity, inclusion, intergenerational guilt, that if you've got light skin color, then you should feel horribly guilty because, maybe your great grandfather did something bad to somebody else, whatever. So this ideology has infiltrated in Ontario for a while, and they pushed back and they got rid of this. But you had your statement of principles where every individual lawyer, in order to practice law in Ontario, you had to sign a statement saying, I agree to promote equity, diversity, inclusion in all areas of my life. I'm paraphrasing. It wasn't those exact words.
What would happen, though, if people wouldn't sign it?
You couldn't practice law. So they've scrapped that. It was called the Statement of Principles. Now, in Alberta, something similar, I would say probably less bad, is you cannot practice law in Alberta unless you take this woke equity, diversity, inclusion course about Aboriginal issues and Aboriginal rights, and you get taught that colonization was basically a mistake, and we all have to fight for decolonization, which they don't really define. I mean, to me, it kind of sounds, you want all the Europeans, Africans, and Asians to go back to where they came from and go back to having, 1 million Aboriginals or fewer living in, what is decolonization anyways? They don't really define it, except they say colonization's bad and decolonization is good. And so every lawyer has to complete this course. Takes 5 to 8 hours in total. I took the course. I completed it.
Did you pass?
I passed. Yeah, it was, well, it was kind of stupid. You could, if you answered a question the wrong way, and a lot of them were true or false, right? So they'd give you this ideological drivel that you could agree or disagree with. But then if you answered the question incorrectly, the screen would pop up and say, well, that answer is not correct. Do you want to try again? So then,
oh man. So you can't answer incorrectly because otherwise you don't make it through.
Well, at the end of the day, all the lawyers have answered all the questions correctly. And so it's this, it's almost comical. And you could say that, other than stealing 5 to 8 hours of your time, what's the big deal? But the big deal is that it's coercive, right? Yeah. It would be like if I said, do you want to come to my event and listen to me talk for an hour about stuff? And you said yes, and you agreed to it, versus I force you to listen to me for an hour. That's completely different. And that's what the Alberta Law Society is doing. They force all the lawyers in Alberta to give, 5 to 8 hours of their time to tick off to get exposed to what the Law Society wants them to get exposed to. So it's a form of indoctrination. If you don't complete the course, then you're not eligible to practice law in Alberta.
How?
So Roger Song is suing the Law Society, which takes anybody who knows anything about lawyers and law societies. It takes an astronomical amount of courage for any lawyer anywhere in Canada to sue the Law Society where they live, because these people have the power over you. They can take your license away. You've probably heard the saying, don't bite the hand that feeds you. I mean, it's a very courageous move on the part of Roger Song, as well as, as well as his lawyer, Glenn Blackett, who is also a member of the Alberta Law Society, who is acting for Roger Song. So we lost at trial, but now it's heading to the Alberta Court of Appeal.
Okay. I don't understand, I guess, because I'm not a lawyer. On what basis can a law society just invent some arbitrary course? Like, lawyers go to law school, they study the criminal code, they study common law, they study civil law if they're in Quebec, sometimes both, if they're in another province and they want to be able to practice here. But on what basis can they just invent something? Like, let's say I was, part of the law society and I really was passionate about dogs. Could I force everybody to, do a 5-hour course on dogs? Like, that would be pretty benign.
It would be benign, sure. Your question hits the nail right on the head. How they've done this, it's very clever, right? It's through saying that in order to be a competent lawyer, you need cultural competency. And in order to have cultural competency, you need to learn and take to heart our perspective on Aboriginals and Aboriginal rights. And you need to learn that this is an oppressed group that should have special rights, and we should all feel guilty, and whatever, the whole package, the whole kit and caboodle. So it's very clever. They say you need to take this course in order to be competent. But then that's obviously a political decision, because you could make the argument that in order to be a competent lawyer, you should know about the Holodomor, the forced starvation of millions of Ukrainians under Stalin, and you should know about the Holocaust, and you should know about this and about that, and it's a never-ending list. So the very fact that you have selected one particular issue or people group or topic, namely that it's about Aboriginals and how colonization was terrible, and we need to all work towards decolonization, that is political in the same way that it would be political if you said all the lawyers have to learn about the Holodomor genocide perpetrated against Ukrainians.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it's necessary. Or, are they arguing that all of the lawyers that didn't take their Marxist course weren't competent prior to them inventing their Marxist course?
This, by necessary implication, I suppose they were, because this has never been, and don't get me wrong, I think it's a great thing to learn about history and learn about Aboriginals, and knowledge is good. But for the Law Society to pick one thing and then to teach it a certain way, this was not open-ended, right? If the Law Society said every lawyer in Alberta should pick one ethnic group or one set of ethnic groups and do a research project and find out more about it, but then that begs the same question. I mean, does the Law Society need to start dictating what your particular knowledge base is outside of the practice of law?
Yeah, it doesn't.
Should all lawyers be very educated about chemistry or about physics or about this or about that? I mean, we all have huge gaps in our knowledge on so many different topics, right? So, but this is how the Law Society does it, and the court kind of ignored how this is like a corrosive acid eating against the Constitution, because the Constitution of Canada is about individual rights and freedoms, and the law societies, the legal profession, is supposed to uphold the Constitution. When you start promoting equity, diversity, inclusion, those principles are antithetical to Canada's Constitution. And so when you're asking lawyers to promote equity, diversity, inclusion, you end up with a situation like where this Jonathan Yaniv in British Columbia wanted his male parts, wanted a Brazilian bikini wax, and was phoning up these estheticians. One of our clients went to 10 different law firms. Nobody would take her on as a client because the law firm said, we're scared of being transphobic. We don't want to be called transphobic, right? So this is very sad when law societies...
For people who might not know about that case, this was a trans identifying male.
Yes.
Who was going around to different beauty salons to try and coerce women who work there into waxing his testicles, claiming to be female. And when they refused, he would take legal action against them.
That's exactly what happened. We defeated Yaniv in British Columbia, and then more recently he had filed a human rights complaint against the Galaxy pageants based in Mississauga, Toronto. He wanted to enter this beauty pageant and have access to the girls' change room where there's girls as young as 6 years old are changing there. God. They have a no males policy. It doesn't matter whether you're the grandfather, father, stepfather, brother, uncle. There's no men allowed. And Yaniv wanted in, and so that case, fortunately, his complaint ended up being dismissed. But going back to the law societies, it's a problem if the law societies are pushing their the lawyers to adopt a political agenda. It means that lawyers are not free to advocate the way that they could and should for their own clients.
Yeah, I have a question. Does everybody have to do this? Like, do all lawyers have to do it, or is this just for lawyers from a certain point onward, or like, is it annual? Like, how does it work?
Well, this course in Alberta is called The Path, and all lawyers had to take it. I think there were some exemptions. You like that name, The Path?
I can't cope. Like, I'm immediately. This is why I have to be self-employed. Like, it's like immediate no, right away. The path, nope. I'm not taking the path. I'm not walking that path. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, every lawyer had to take it. They made exemptions. I think Aboriginal lawyers did not have to take the path.
Wow.
So
okay.
They had that exemption, and
they're already on the path, I guess.
They've got the right genetics, the right ethnicity, the right skin color, so they can be exempted, right? But all the non-Aboriginal lawyers, probably 99%, I have no idea what percentage, but
Yeah.
So everybody had to take this, and I'm not aware of lawyers that refuse to take it. I mean, the stakes are a little bit too high. If you refuse to take it, then you are not eligible to practice law, so you can no longer earn a living as a lawyer. So I think every lawyer took it. Roger Song probably took it as well, but he has had the courage to sue the Law Society over it. And
good for him.
We'll see where that goes. It's now going to the Alberta Court of Appeal.
I think this is a really important case, and I didn't want to distract from the also very important information that you published about the nudge unit. But I think it's really important because this is one of the primary methods, as I see it, that this state ensures that whatever view they're putting forward of society, and right now it's definitely leaning Marxist, will be either ignored or will not be resisted, because it isn't just law societies, it's all sorts of professional organizations. And so it's like going through regulatory boards to get the outcomes that they want from people, to kind of force this submission. And so we did see that during the COVID regime. And we saw it through, like medical insurance and all sorts of different ways. And so I really hope that he'll have success in this, because I think that it could have very far-reaching ramifications, if you prevail. So what stage are you at now?
So we lost at trial, and the court didn't really.
Why?
They kind of skirted the whole issue of how the Law Society requirement to take this course and certain creating these vague cultural competencies as part of your qualification, how that was undermining the rule of law, as well as this push in the code of ethics that every lawyer should be working for reconciliation. This whole notion that everybody's required. It was like COVID, right? Everybody has to wear a mask and everybody has to get injected. And now, like, everybody, you got to get with the program, and you have to embrace reconciliation and promote decolonization. So the court kind of avoided that issue. It didn't really grapple with it. And so an appeal has been filed. And so this will be heard by the Alberta Court of Appeal in early 2026, with a ruling probably in late 2026, and just take it one step at a time. And if we don't win, we have to make the effort to expose this woke ideology. And kudos to people who are fighting back. Like, you've got Amy Ham in British Columbia, being prosecuted, being found guilty of professional misconduct, because as a registered nurse, she stated publicly that there are only two sexes, and she's found guilty of misconduct. So, it's really up to you and me and all of our viewers and listeners. I mean, if we passively resign ourselves to, oh, it's just going to get worse, we will end up in very bad places if we don't arrest this cancer of this woke ideology and fight back and push back. But it can be defeated, because when people speak up and push back, but yeah, lots of work ahead of us.
Yeah. How can people support you? Where can they find you? And, what should they keep an eye out for going forward?
So if you want more information about the Justice Center, our website is www.jccf, so Justice Center Constitutional Freedoms, jccf.ca. You can sign up for a free email newsletter that we send out once or twice a month to keep you updated on our cases. And check out our website. If you like our work, feel welcome to donate. We're funded 100% by voluntary donations from Canadians. We don't ask for or receive any government funding. And we are a registered charity. So if you donate between now and December 31st, for example, you will get an official tax receipt in February. So.
Yeah, you're doing amazing work.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I also asked, I don't know if you were aware, but I asked if I could speak with your Quebec lawyer as well. And we'll do an episode in French. So we'll see how that goes, because my French is like, it's street French. But I'll do my best.
Ça va, tout le monde va être capable de comprendre. Everybody will understand. So.
Oui, c'est sûr. Mais je parle joual. Alors, il faut que je pratique un peu avant pour avoir un niveau un peu plus sophistiqué, because I don't want to be, je sais pas moi and saying things like that. Yeah, there's a limit. There's a limit to what people can tolerate. But I'm looking forward to it. Thank you for all the good work that you're doing. And everybody, just so you know, I'm going to put up a recording on YouTube and on Rumble. And if you want to get the information out, it really helps if you like, comment, bookmark, follow, share, and send the information to some of your friends who may not know that any of this is going on, word of mouth. And thanks to everybody for watching, and thanks to everybody who is supporting us. And thank you for your time today, John.
Thanks for having me on your show. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you. You too.
Okay, do you